And the panelists that are just joining us now, what I'd like to do is have them introduce themselves and just give a little bit of introduction of either what they do and some things that maybe you can get an idea of some questions to ask them. So do you want to start with you, Karan? Okay. Allison.
I'm Allison. Allison Buneman. I'm the industry principal for the chemicals industry at Seek. I have the pleasure of working with Mike at Westlake and all of our other customers in the chemicals space, helping them understand ways to unlock business value with their data.
Karen?
I'm Kieran Mida. I'm with Cognite, and echoing Allison here, I have the pleasure of working with Espen in Norway. We're based out of Oslo, Norway, headquartered there, but working globally with our customers. And again, we had a few customers actually here at the event, so it's been a really great event. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you. And Ajay?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ajay Madhvesh. I'm the chief or the head of commercial operations for Uptake. Here, supporting Chris in the journey at Phillips 66. So, like many of the other panelists here, we have many customers who came with us. So, want to recognize all of them too through this panel session. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is ask the audience for questions. There should be someone walking around with a mic. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions. You're thinking about them. But so I guess one of the things that I was thinking about is, I guess we can start with this, is if you had to do over the project, you had to do over, is there anything that you do differently, or would you do it all the same? No laughing. So does anyone want to answer that?
I mean, we nailed it, so.
So Michael? Yes.
No, perfect.
Perfect,
Yeah,
okay.
Actually, I can't take credit for the success of our rollout. It was really, we were set up for success. So I do have to give a shout out to Doug Niddick, if you ever watches this, but he was a he was a super user that was in a high level role, and just having his support and saying we can do this was so critical, because if he had a foundation across all of the different franchises we're building, and so just gonna give him a shout out. But that's just a very successful way to do these pilots to large scale deployments, is having that right stakeholder from the beginning supporting.
Okay. Yes, we have a question in front here. Sylvester. Oh, yeah, get the mic. Yeah, we need to be on the mic, because otherwise the video that they're recording, you won't be able to hear it later.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentations, all great presentations. I was just wondering, I guess that's a question for you, Espen. How do you get the data off the vessel? And you mentioned it's multiple petabytes even, or terabytes, I'm not so sure, but in any case, how do you get the data off?
Yeah, okay, so so there's two types of data, right? So the seismic data for the time being is still being sent on tapes, on disks and stuff like that. That's still too large to transmit. We are looking in ways of doing that, because we can imagine a full sort of cloud run digital flow of delivering the data. Technology is getting there with Starlink and these guys, but it's not quite there yet for our purposes. But we are going to test this, right? But the other end of that is the acceptance and the taking delivery on the client side. We're ahead of the game here, right? We're more prepared to them than they are really to accept all this data. But that's coming. They're all talking about it, but they just need to sort of push them in the right direction. The user-generated data, that's streamed off the vessels. So that's relatively, in terms of sort of volume, not that much. Right? And we did have some data from before as well that we had sort of coming in on the more traditional ways, yeah. But it's satellite communication, yeah.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Oh, over there. This one.
So I heard a lot of you talk to agile delivery strategy. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about how you define your products, specifically so that you can deploy delivery teams toward those products.
Does anybody want to take that?
Yeah,
Michael?
The example that I gave, I
You
mean,
can
this-
grab the mic and
Okay,
pull it
sure.
out if you want.
in my case, it was more or less that, we just need to get this deployed. So we weren't necessarily designing the product. I mean, it was really about designing the goal, I think was the focus. So with each of our iterations, what's the goal in 2 weeks? I mean, we had a long-term goal, but we defined very short-term goals. So the goal was really the focus and knowing what success looked like, each of those goals, because we set it up so where we didn't know in the next 2 weeks what our goal was going to be. So it was really just making sure every 2 weeks we had a good process for goal definition.
I think just keeping the end users close to the project, keeping them in the loop on the demos and on the processes there. That's extremely key to getting the adoption on the outside. These are very, for our on that part on the digital factory, relatively small, and some of them are relatively. The product isn't it's not a huge one like you guys are working on, sort of data like that. So the implementation is relatively small, right? And the deployment is small. But even more important that you actually have the end user really using it and getting and taking advantage of it. I mean, that's the owner of it, right? They need to be accountable for the money spent on actually developing it. So.
Perfect.
I can add to that a little bit with what Espen's saying. I think he talked about it a little bit earlier, which is really being able to start small, identify those use cases, and then those use cases can eventually become those data products. And then that once it's deployed, it's scaled, and that scalability also winds up building that high-value library of use cases, which then in Espen's case, in PGS's case, has actually been productized a bit.
Okay, do we have any more questions? If not, I have some. Michael, how much resistance did you face when you were proposing this cloud architecture, and what advantages did you see as a SaaS user regarding the self-service software?
Yeah, so doing a cloud deployment in SaaS, it was very new to Westlake. And I'll give a lot of credit to the IT organization who didn't just say the answer is no and that's it. They wanted to hear us out and hear what the options are. Because we are so benefits and ROI-driven company, we said, well, I mean, if there's a deal here, let's hear it, And so they were open-minded to doing this and understanding what the risk was, in terms of data security, but what the reward was in no infrastructure to manage and very light administration requirements. They agreed and said, yeah, I think this will work. And I don't think anyone regrets that decision. I think we see it as a success, so far. And I think it just opens the door to say, okay, we understand how this works. We recognize that it's a good way to go forward, and we'll likely do more of it.
Okay.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
Not
That would be great.
Not resistance, but I was just education of management, if you like, because moving to the cloud is not a lift and shift operation, right? You need to do more of it. I mean, just putting in a cloud, that's not enough. You need to actually utilize the cloud functions. I mean, just having a virtual machine out there to run the software and run the process is not enough. So you're actually utilizing the cloud functions to do that. And it's an educational process for both internally, but especially management, right? Understanding what this is, right? And what the benefit is, the scalability. Sorry.
I think there's also a financial shift too, right? Going from your CapEx to OpEx from a cloud perspective. And it's that mindset that you have to have in mind as you're developing all of this. It's not just, hey, there's CapEx that you're spending initially. It's thinking of the long game and setting yourself up from a financial perspective to have enough OpEx to support the cloud-based or SaaS-based solutions as well.
Can I add a follow-up question for the audience? Can I get a hand raised if you use at least one SaaS-based application in your role?
Really great.
That's pretty good.
So I'm going to ask a question, kind of building on what you just asked, Janice. So as opposed to resistance, can you speak to perhaps instances where people wanted you to move faster than you were ready to, where it could be an instance of a super user who's maybe a super uber excited user, or some stakeholder who's, you know, sees lots of opportunity and they're saying, hey, you know what, we're going to win the next quarter with with this new tool. So just speaking to how to manage expectations, or kind of shape and move things along in a more steady path. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, right? Because anytime any sponsor of any kind throws money out there, they want to see returns quickly. Mergers, acquisitions, whatever it may be, they're wanting to see that return quickly. And so, again, to what Espen was talking about earlier, having those stakeholders engage from the very beginning so that they're part of not only the design, but the entirety of everything. There's an ownership there. And there's also clarity into, okay, I realize that this isn't going to be a very quick sprint, right? It is a journey, it is a marathon. Again, depending on the use case, if you've got low-hanging fruit use cases, right, you can see some of those pieces come online pretty quick and start to see some sort of return. But if it's larger in nature, obviously it's going to take longer. And so having folks engaged up front along the entire value chain of what it is that you're trying to build, I think is a key component to making sure that people don't have unrealistic expectations.
Ajay, you want to
Yeah.
add to that?
I want to generalize what Chris said in a bit more kind of broader perspective, that we are seeing that people who are truly committed to transformation see that big picture, right? So the short-term returns are important, short-term wins are important, but they also realize that the part at the end of the rainbow with gold is out there. So I think, people like Chris, I'm going to use him as an example, they actually walk these value propositions across different business units to bring that value, expose that value. And I think that's how big shifts are being made. And that's what we see in the market today.
Anybody else want to comment? Well, I have another question. 'Cause it was a discussion actually we had at lunchtime today, and it was like, do you look for the problems first and then try to figure out what technology would help solve that problem, or do you just put the technology in place and let it find the problems, like analytics and things like that? So it would be interesting to hear your approaches.
Say the same thing.
I mean, I'll go first. Yeah, if you build it, they will come. No. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely problem first. I think one thing Westlake does well is allows people to go and find a local optimum. And this was a case where one group did one thing and they really liked it. They liked it so much they wanted to tell people about it. And all we did was listen and say, okay, I think this has much bigger spread. How do we just get it in more people's hands, knowing that it's already been proven, and let them explain why it's proven, not me. So it's just giving people a platform and then just mapping out a path to be able to do it. But absolutely problem first, whenever possible. If you're lucky, problems come to you. A lot of times you're going to have to dick around for them. So.
Yeah. Same. So for us, I mean, our PMO office or project management office, you can't even ask for money unless there is some sort of value prop or statement to it. Now, in every solution or every situation, there's not always a value prop there. Sometimes it's, hey, we've got to have this in order to manage obsolescence, right? But in most of these types of digital use cases, you better be solving a problem, because at the end of the day, IT or whatever it is, that's not what's making the company money. We're there to serve the customer. And in this case, it's oil and gas, it's whatever else, right?
Espen, did you want to?
No, echo all that.
I think from the software side, hear me?
Yeah.
From the software side, for the technology services provider side, we at Cognite also see that, the customer does tend to start with the problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't really know where to start. So it's important to identify the problem first. And in our case, with the PGS, for example, it's starting with those 3 to 4 use cases first, and then iterating on top of them, scaling them like we talked about earlier. Scalability will only come if you have a test bed.
So another question I have is, and it has to do with the data operations platforms. And as they mature, there's this, and the technology, there's there's sort of a responsibility shift between the business and IT in their traditional roles. And I was wondering if you guys could comment on that. How you seeing that shift with the roles with IT and the business?
I thought Mike's little org chart that he presented was really interesting, given that his digital office is something that's separate from IT, but kind of adjacent to both IT and the business. I think that's a really nice and interesting way to think about digital as not only being part of IT, but being part of the broader company.
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little on that. I mean, it does start when we talk to businesses, the first thing we have to say is, hey, we're not IT, because that's what they just think will fix their workstation. But the idea of having, you know, a group that's kind of enabling, but the business is, it's their data, they're the ones who are creating it and using it. You know, they're driving it. We all three are required. And separating them, I think, has been very successful so far. You know, IT at first wasn't sure what we were supposed to be doing, but now that we have a successful project, they understand, okay, when there's a use case that we need to understand how to actually implement, IT's not going to do that. They're going to make sure the data is available, but we implement. We're the ones that are shepherding the solutions, and it's a good partnership.
I want to think of it in the following way. So there was a time when, you know, IT was a cost function, meaning that it was they were not a for-profit organization. And I think the way some of the organizations have transformed themselves is by either augmenting that function, technology function, with a value proposition that comes out of it. So I think, you know, there are various ways that different customers have done this. Some people have chief analytics officer, some people have chief data officer. So all of these people are ultimately trying to create a value proposition for their own organization, while also taking responsibility for the maintenance of secure data within their organization. So I think that transformation, whichever way it takes, you know, the Venn diagram was a fantastic depiction of one of the ways that the organizations are migrating themselves. The other thing that you'll see is a business-led the digital transformation office, which is a mix of people from technology functions, the CTO's office, and also the IT functions, all come together to drive that transformation. So ultimately, what's good about all of this is that the digitalization, as Espen said, is here. And it's, you know, which was kind of the hardest thing for it to kind of emerge out of the existing organization. So I think that's a great thing, and that was the cool theme that I saw across the three presentations here.
Does anybody else want to add to that? Okay. I think we have a question here, Jane.
Okay, so I'm Jane Arnold. I have about 35 years of manufacturing experience, most of that in process and some of that in discrete. So this question, I believe, is for Michael concerning Westlake. And you described having both process, batch, or all three, and discrete. And in my past experience, there were similar problems especially with data, but the solutions were sometimes different, and I'm kind of wondering how you took that approach.
Yeah, so it is a challenge because of the variety of the manufacturing environments. You know, what we say is, you know, salt comes out of one side and siding comes out the other, and we do everything in between to make that. So there's a lot of different, you know, problems to solve in between. We want to take a very holistic approach to, you know, one platform to do it all. That's not going to be possible. And a lot of this is due to just organizationally, you know, a factory has 5 people, and one of these chemical plants has 4,000 people. They need different tools. And in some cases, they need solutions built for them that they basically don't have to touch. In other cases, you can go into self-service. So we don't have a one-size-fits-all, but in general, we have, you know, as few as we can do it, that's what we do it. And it's, you know, a handful. Hopefully that answered your question.
It does, thank you. I'm just curious the approach. All the presentations were very good, very interesting, so thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? There's another one right beside him. it's good if you state your name too and the company.
Jim Graves with Indorama Ventures. So we talked about ROI and value a lot and use cases. Sometimes I feel like we get caught in a use case trap where that's all we do is use case, use case, use case, use case. But I think if we know the answer and we know where we need to go, that's really about vision and trying to get there. So, you know, one thing I'm curious if you've tried to calculate or some way, take credit for is the value of people's time in your organizations, because I think what we're after here is two things. We're wanting to get to answers and new information, but we're also wanting to make it quicker for people so that they can be more valuable with their time, perhaps do more valuable things. So have you taken any kind of tactic to look at, what you're providing in terms of quality of people's lives and the value of their time?
We haven't done it, but we really, really wanted to, because that is one of the biggest and quickest benefits you get from this, right? I mean, but it's extremely difficult, right? I mean, it would be very subjective, right? So if I spend time on this and I can do this much better or faster, but actually seeing that the delivery of the data is quicker, right? It will release time on this person's hand, and then they can do other stuff. But it is kind of intangible. So no, we didn't embark on that, but your comment earlier on the use case, I have the same comment from he was supposed to be the sort of the product owner of deliberating the multi-client data, and he was also kind of fed up about this use case focus, but we managed to turn him, right? So now he's a favorite. So, because it is important, right? I mean, you need to split it down into these small compartments.
Okay, Allison? Yeah.
I would say there's nothing that gets our team more excited than when some engineer says, you saved like 8 hours of my week every week. And that then translates into the more tangible use case driven business ROI that comes from solving productivity, reliability, quality type challenges. But it's improving that person's productivity and making their job easier, and in some cases making their job fun. That's going to inspire some of those bigger picture high ROI use cases.
I have one. Sorry, one tangible one. We mapped out the services of a third party to us to was doing part of the delivery of the data to the clients. Spreadsheet, naturally, right? So 80 lines in this spreadsheet, and then we mapped out what the process would look afterwards. We had done this, and we're down to 20 points, or 20 lines. So that's obviously less work and less interaction with us, between us and the third party as well as less sort of money spent on that third party. So just say one thing.
So I
Ajay?
can barely see you, but the use case is also a pretty poorly used word. Everyone defines use case the way they feel what a use case should be, which is also a problem. It goes back to your point about, anyone can call anything use case, and it's usually what we've seen is when someone says use case, it leads to a POC, which is, going back to the earlier question about, where's the value if you keep doing POCs, I think. So I think I take your comment in that way, because ultimately people are saying, I want to do more with less people, which is to the point that you're also referring to. And it's almost like, unmeasurable, because POCs never really give you those results, or the one use case never gives you that benefit at that point. So I think it is, in general, I think we should all rethink whenever we use the term use case, that we should be careful what it means.
Okay.
I think I was just going to add a little bit about the user's time, the end user's time. The idea of having a very good technology partner, and this is one of the threads I saw in the presentations also, is to have someone who can actually really help to make their lives easier. And if it's a really good data foundation, that is part of the tech stack, whether it's for business or for IT, the entire purpose of that part of your technology partner, that tech stack, really should be to make their lives easier. It should be faster to get at the data. It should be faster to scale that data, to build the use cases, for lack of a better word, or solve their problems, if you will. And then to be able to actually build, like I said earlier, to be able to build a library of high-value data products, if you will, that are then reusable by others in the organization.
Okay, we have about a few minutes left. I guess we have time for one more question.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Jumping in here at the end, and I'm trying to look around the corner too, but just to give you a perspective, it's Mark Brossel from Epcor Water. So as a utility, one of the things we were looking at as we go forward and look at some of these initiatives, and as some of them get bigger, I'm curious, like we're looking, do we need a separate governance structure to look at these kind of, advanced automation and looking these kind of things? Is there a separate structure we need to be doing? Because if you're going to put these projects in, a utility, we've got aging infrastructure. So do I want my advanced automation projects to be competing with those? And it sounds like in some of the areas that, yeah, projects go through a sort of one process. Is there a separate process that's actually used for some of the things that are being done here, a separate governance structure? Or is it all sort of lumped together into just projects?
Does anybody want to come?
Can I ask a
Ajay?
question? By governance, do you mean data governance or just the governance at the organization level?
So at the organization level, what gets approved, like projects? You've got so much money in an organization to do projects, and I know, you're looking at these smaller projects, and that's certainly some, but, like you say, we're going to go out and put water meters on everybody's house, right, across the city of Edmonton, which is 1.5 million people. Significant investment that the utility is going to do, but it's going to be able to provide a bunch of information for us and a bunch of data and things that we need. But we're also competing with other things, and we're looking at saying, do we put these all through the same structure, or is there a different governance, a different evaluation of those kind of projects that you need to go through as opposed to other projects in the organization, or are they all lumped together?
So I can't speak to how every other organization is stood up, but I can speak to how ours is. And from us, it was a top-down approach. Our executives, our C-suite, our board of directors said, we need to fundamentally change the way that we do business. Not just to increase returns or things for shareholders, which is obviously, that is a key driver, but also to survive. And if you've got these initiatives competing with other initiatives, and they're both a high priority, which one gets done? And so by an entire C-suite being completely aligned with what the strategy is moving forward, it obviously trickles down to the various respective business units, leaders within each function, et cetera, and they have a full clarity as to what it is that they want to execute for that year. Some of them are transformative, some of them are keep the lights on. And you've got to balance the two, right? Because if you do, again, technology without keeping your OE high, you don't survive. So you do have to strike that balance. But having your executives and the respective sponsors for whatever project or initiatives that you're doing being completely aligned on what the prioritization is, that's key.
Okay, well, I think we're just about out of time, but what I'd like to do to close is ask each of our panelists and speakers to give the audience one takeaway from this session. So we can start with you, Ajay.
I think almost building on the last comment, the time has come when there's enough technology maturity that you should think about, all the people in the operational world should think about transformation, because I think, I can speak for myself. We've done a lot of POCs. We actually, they're great in their own way, and they should be done in certain cases. But I think if you're doing POCs for technology, like using them as spikes in sprints, then I think that time is over. I mean, because now you can realize value with a fair amount of certainty. And that's my input to everyone who's here, as to consider that as you move forward.
Kieran?
I would say that build MVPs. Think about your POCs as building, or even your first POC that you're building. Think about it as an MVP and not necessarily just as a POC. Again, it's changing the jargon a bit. Or you're building digital twins with your software. So jargon is not what's saving or is not driving digital transformation. It is going to be digital twins that's driving your digital transformation. So the way that I think we think about it, Cognite, is really focus on whatever it is that you're trying, whatever problems you're trying to solve, focus on building that MVP that is then scalable across the organization, across the company.
Allison?
I would say people is kind of my central theme. People are the ones who feel the pain that technology attempts to solve and address. And so really empowering your people and making them, or making their lives easier, giving them time back is going to be a huge success factor.
Espen?
Yeah, a flavor of that. I mean, it's digital transformation is not all about the tools and the gadgets. It's about changing the organization, doing things new ways, adapting to ways of expected of clients, but doing things better and just change the way you do it. I mean, if you just keep going like you do, you make your profits, but you still, you can improve on that if you change it.
Mike?
I was also going to say people, as you and Nelson, but I'd say passion. All of the people that were most passionate on this project made it not only fun, but it made it successful because they were the ones really, cheerleading this, not us. So that was really, really helpful.
That's good. People's a good one. If I'm going to go a different direction, I would say you're not alone. You are not crazy in these ideas that you all have. You're here for a reason. You came to listen to these speeches, these presentations for a reason. And oftentimes we all feel alone, but we are all on this journey together. We are all on this highway together. I was given this analogy earlier. It's a cross-country highway. We're getting on at different points of that highway, but we're all headed towards the same direction. And so know that you're not crazy. You've got lots of partners. You've got lots of other folks that you can reach out to. And yeah, you're not alone.
Okay, well, with that, I'd just like to thank all of our speakers and the panelists for joining us today, and their companies for all their time. And we really did appreciate. I thought they had excellent presentations. And I also wanted to mention that tonight's SeaWorld, so everybody knows, and everybody's invited. And so that's important. We got to get going for that. And if anybody's interested, if you weren't interested in some of the data for the data platforms, we have David Clayton's outside beside the ARC registration desk. So if you want to take a look, on the way out, you can take a quick look. And he has the actual data there. So anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. We had a great audience. And let's just have a round of applause for our speakers and panelists.